The whole debate about whether or not Israel should be obliged to stop building settlements during the peace process itself was detached from reality. There is no dispute whatsoever in international law, there is none, that the settlements are illegal. All 15 judges in the International Court of Justice, including the American judge, reached the opinion in July 2004 that all the settlements are illegal. Under the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, the settlements constitute a war crime. So it's a curious peace process that would debate whether Israel should be allowed to continue committing war crimes during negotiations. Does a convicted thief get to continue stealing until the judge hands down a sentence? If it's pointless to squander energy on the peace process, it's equally pointless to squander energy trying to figure out what Mr. Obama wants. Our job is to muster sufficient political will so that Mr. Obama does the right thing, or at any rate doesn't keep doing the wrong thing, regardless of what he wants. When you focus on the powers on high, when you're waiting for a Messiah, even a black Messiah, it's a confession of impotence. There's a simple but fundamental truth of politics, which even the most resolute of atheists could agree to, and that is, God helps those who help themselves. God helps those who help themselves. If you don't like what's going on, if you think it's unjust, if you think it's wrong, and you have to look to yourself, or we have to look to ourselves to make the right thing happen. And you look for people on high to make it happen. In my opinion, at any rate, you're squandering energy and you're squandering time. Now, I've been involved in this thing for some 30 years, and it's a very sobering thought. It really is, that my entire adult life has passed on this conflict, that I've devoted so much time and energy focused on one tiny pinprick on the world's map. Forget about what Israel and Palestine look like from the Milky Way. And there's lots of reasons to feel hopeless and despairing, and to even sometimes wonder whether it was the most prudent of investments of a lifetime. But actually now, amid all the grim news and all the grounds for despair and worry, there actually is excellent reasons to be hopeful and optimistic. There are. Public opinion is changing. If you look at the polls for Canada, public opinion is changing. Jewish public opinion is changing. Most Jews are liberal. 80% of American Jews voted for Barack Obama, which is a much, much higher percentage than Latinos who voted for Barack Obama. Latinos was about 63%. When you factor in income, Jews being by far and away the wealthiest ethnic group in the United States, they should be voting Republican. But no, Jews vote the Democrat. They're liberal. And liberal basically means, in the American context, support for the rule of law, equality before the law, support for human rights, support for international organizations. It's liberal organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch and Richard Goldstone who are in the forefront criticizing Israel. And so for Jews, it's become much more difficult to reconcile their liberal credo and beliefs with what Israel is doing. A young man interviewed me just before I came to speak here, and he asked me about the tense climate on college campuses. And I said to him, well, actually, it's not true anymore. It's very rare any longer that you have the kind of hysteria, the heckling, the demonstrations, and all the rest. Why? Because most young Jews are liberal, they're idealistic, and they do not want to have to publicly defend what's plainly indefensible. If you're a Rush Limbaugh, a Sean Hannity, some throwback to pre-Cambrian men, then it's okay, it's not so difficult. But if you're young, Jewish, liberal, idealistic, you don't want to defend dropping white phosphorus on hospitals. You don't want to defend an assault on a humanitarian vessel carrying cargo to Gaza. And so there's a lot of reason for hope now. Public opinion has changed. But it's not enough for public opinion to have changed. It has to be turned into a political force. Because if it's just you two saying to each other, I don't like what Israel is doing, or it's you, or you, listening individually to the news or watching the news and shaking your head, I don't go for that, what Israel is doing. It doesn't have any political consequences. People have to be organized and turn their disenchantment or disgust into a political force. We have to organize. But if we organize, I think there's now sufficient public opinion that if it's organized, it can make a difference. And our challenge now, in my opinion, is twofold. Number one, we have to be principled. We have to be principled, and that means we have no right to tell the Palestinians that they have to forfeit any of their rights in the interests of a settlement of the conflict. Those are their rights, and we have an obligation to either support their rights. I did not say support anything they do. I said support their rights, or, if you'll excuse my Brooklyn English, or then just shut up. But don't tell Palestinians that they have to forfeit any of their internationally guaranteed rights in the interests of reaching a settlement. But on the other hand, we have to be reasonable. We have to show Israel, its supporters in the US, that there is a way to resolve the conflict. It does not have to go on through eternity, and it does not have to have, which it may very well have, catastrophic consequences. Just be reasonable. Respect the decency, the humanity, and the right to a good life of everybody living in that area. Be reasonable. Those elementary moral principles, do unto others what you would want done unto you. Be reasonable, be just, be fair. The Palestinians are not asking for the sun, the moon, and the stars. They want the same right as everyone to have a fair chance at life's happiness, a fair chance. Everyone in this room is old enough to know that human beings have a remarkable capacity for messing up their own efforts to have a good life. But everybody has a right to a fair chance at life's happiness. If you mess it up, that's your problem. But nobody should be deprived of the right to achieve it. And that's what the Palestinians are asking for. The same basic rights as everyone else. If you're reasonable, if you're fair, if you're just, if you're decent, elementary human decency, then as the late Professor Edward Said, at the end of his life, he liked to quote the Caribbean poet Aimé Césaire. And the line he liked to quote was, "There's room for everyone at the rendezvous of victory." There's room for everyone at the rendezvous of victory. This is not about victor and vanquished. I don't like that terminology. I don't want to be victorious because that means somebody else has to be vanquished. And I don't want to vanquish anyone. I want just for everyone to come out of this with a decent prospect for a good life. If you're on board for that, then there's room for you at that rendezvous of victory. Now, I'm getting on in years, and sometimes I'm hopeless, and sometimes I'm despairing. But I still hope, maybe against hope, but I still hope that I'm going to be there at that rendezvous of victory, but I'll only get there if all of you are there with me. Thank you.